Tonight, I'll guide you gently into rest through a quiet story drawn from the world of Greek mythology, not as a tale of thunder or battle or the bright and restless halls of Olympus, but as a slow descent into the hidden places beneath it. The quiet fire under stone, the long fall from heaven, the stillness of the sea, a cave lit by embers, the patient shaping of metal in the dark, and the steady hands of a god who worked far from the light. But there is nothing you need to follow, and nothing you need to remember. You can simply listen for as long as it feels natural. Lie down comfortably, legs extended, arms resting gently at your sides. And if it feels natural, allow your eyes to close. Take a slow inhale and a soft exhale. Allow your body to settle into the surface beneath you. If you need to shift slightly, you can do that now, and then gently soften into stillness. Tonight, you'll be guided through a quiet unfolding, not of war, not of spectacle, but of warmth, craft, and the hidden rhythm of creation. A fire glowing beneath the mountain, a forgotten sun descending through the sky, the shelter of the sea, the sound of careful hammering echoing through a secret forge, and the slow return of something cast down, becoming beautiful, becoming necessary, becoming sacred. And as these images pass, you do not need to hold them. You can simply let them drift, like red light through darkness, like the hush of water outside a cave, like the steady pulse of flame and metal far below the world above. And somewhere in that quiet, beneath the mountain, where the forge still glows, the first story begins. Far below the bright air of Olympus, and far below the fields and harbors of the waking world, there was always a quieter place, a place of stone, of shadow, of warmth held deep within the earth. Not the quick flare of wildfire, not the violence of a burning city, but an older fire, slower, steadier, breathing in silence beneath the world above. There, in hidden chambers untouched by sun, the rock was dark and heavy, veined with a faint red glow, as if the mountain itself were dreaming. And in that dream, it kept a single ember alive. The air was warm, not stifling, but close and constant, like the lingering heat of a hearth long tended. And if one listened carefully, there was always some quiet sound waiting in the dark. The hush of bellows filling, the soft settling of ash, the distant note of metal meeting metal, not sharply but gently, as if even the hammer knew not to disturb the stillness. This was the realm of Hephaestus, not first as the gods would later speak of him, not yet as the maker of wonders, not yet as the smith whose hands could shape bronze into beauty, or gold into motion, or shields into whole little worlds, but first as a presence in the deep, a patience, a warmth, a craft waiting in the dark for its hour to be known. While Zeus was imagined in thunder, and Poseidon in the restless sea, and Apollo in bright and unshadowed light, Hephaestus belonged to another order of power, to what is hidden, to what is worked slowly, to what is formed not in a moment of glory, but over time, in heat, in effort, in quiet devotion. His was the power that does not rush, the power that takes what is rough, what is buried, what seems heavy and unremarkable, and brings from it a new shape. In his hands, ore would not remain ore. Metal would not remain mute. The dark heart of the mountain would not remain closed. Everything could be opened, warmed, struck with care, and given form. And perhaps this is why his story begins so well in a place like this. Because before there were palaces, before there were thrones, before there were nets of unbreakable chain, golden maidens, bronze guardians, or the shining armor of heroes, there was only the simple mystery of transformation. Stone keeping fire, fire softening metal, metal yielding to the hand that understood it. It is an old kind of magic, the kind that does not dazzle at once, the kind that asks for nearness, for listening, for time. You do not look at it all at once. You sit beside it. You let your eyes grow used to the dim red light. You hear the rhythm inside it, and slowly, without effort, it reveals itself. So tonight, there is no need to imagine Hephaestus as fierce or severe or surrounded by noise. Instead, you may picture only this: a wide and quiet forge beneath the mountain, the red shimmer of coals, the low glow along the edge of an anvil, the gentle rise of warmth through the dark, and somewhere nearby, the steady hands of a god at work, not hurried, not angry, not performing for anyone, simply making. For Hephaestus is not the fire that leaps suddenly upward. He is the fire that remains, the fire that waits, the fire that serves, the fire that turns what is hidden inside the earth into something shaped, useful, and strangely beautiful. He is the keeper of craft, of endurance, of patient skill. And even in the deepest chambers, where no sunlight enters, there is nothing lonely in his work, because the forge has its own companionship, the breath of flame, the glow of iron, the measured ringing that returns and fades, like a quiet thought moving through sleep. And as you rest here, for just a little while, in the warmth beneath the mountain, you may begin to feel that this hidden place was always waiting, that long before stories rose into the light, something older was already at work below, a quiet intelligence, a shaping hand, a red and steady fire. And from that hidden fire, in time, the story of Hephaestus would emerge, not in haste, but slowly, as all good things formed in the forge emerge, through warmth, through patience, through the deep and living dark. And before that hidden fire became his home, before the forge beneath the mountain, before the patient glow of metal in the dark, there was a fall. The old stories tell it in more than one way. Some said that Hera, looking upon the child she had brought forth, turned away from him and cast him down from the bright courts of heaven. Others said that much later, when Hephaestus spoke in defense of his mother, Zeus in his anger seized him and sent him falling from Olympus. And perhaps, as often happens in ancient myth, both stories remained, like two dim reflections upon the same dark water. Two memories, each carrying something true, that Hephaestus belonged for a time to the heights, and that from those heights he came down. But tonight, there is no need to linger on anger or shame or judgment. We do not need to stand among the gods or hear their harsh voices. We only notice that somewhere above the world, a figure began to descend. Not suddenly, not as the mind imagines a body thrown in violence, but slowly now, in the softness of this telling, as though the sky itself had opened, and what had once lived among cloud and radiance was now passing downward through long blue distance, farther and farther, through pale air, through drifting light, through spaces untouched by any hand. The bright halls of Olympus receded, their gold becoming faint, their edges dissolving into the quiet of height. And below, the world widened. The sea stretched itself in silver silence. The islands waited in stillness. The mountains rose patiently from the earth. And all the while, Hephaestus continued downward. 9 days and 9 nights, some said, an old and sacred measure of time, long enough for heaven to grow distant, long enough for sorrow to loosen its grip, long enough for the fall itself to become something dreamlike. Perhaps there were moments as he moved through the open sky when there was no fear anymore, only wind, only distance, only the strange hush that comes when one world has already been left behind and another has not yet been reached. And beneath him, the sea was waiting, not with violence, but with depth, not with noise, but with receiving stillness, as though the waters understood what the heavens had forgotten. And so he fell not into ruin, but into another kind of keeping, down toward the quiet places, where exile had not yet become craft, but where craft was already waiting. For sometimes, the oldest myths seem to know that what is cast away does not always vanish. Sometimes it descends into a place where it may be remade. Far above, Olympus remained bright, untouched, self-assured, filled with gods of beauty, thunder, victory, desire. But Hephaestus, moving farther from that brightness, was entering a different kind of world, one less radiant perhaps, but deeper. A world of sea caves, hidden chambers, and patient shelters. A world where silence would be more useful than praise, and where wounded things might still find shape. It is a quiet sadness, this part of his story. Not the sharp sadness of grief cried aloud, but the distant sadness of being unheld, of being sent away before one is fully known, of leaving a place that was meant to be home. And yet, even here, the myth does not end in emptiness, because the fall is not the end of Hephaestus, it is the beginning of his becoming. All that he would later make, the golden halls, the self-moving tripods, the bronze guardians, the delicate chains no one could break, the shield of Achilles with its wide and shining world, all of it still lay ahead, all of it hidden, like ore inside the mountain before the fire touches it. For now, there is only descent, a long passage through air, a dimming of heaven's brightness, and the feeling, so old and so human, of being between worlds, not where one began, not yet where one belongs. And perhaps that is why this moment lingers, because it speaks not only of gods, but of all quiet transformations, of the times when life seems to lower us or carry us far from what was familiar, only for another shape, still unseen, to wait below. The sea grew nearer. The air changed. Light softened upon the water, and somewhere in the distance, beneath the open sky, new hands were waiting to receive the fallen child. Thetis and Eurynome, ancient daughters of the sea, keepers of hidden places, gentle witnesses to what heaven had cast aside, they would gather him from the water and carry him away, not to a throne, not to applause, not to the clear heights of Olympus, but to a quieter refuge, a cave beneath the sea, where flame and water would one day meet, and where the first true forge would begin to glow. So let the fall grow softer now. Let the distance widen and the bright sky fade. Let the sea rise gently to meet him, and let this story move, not toward ruin, but toward shelter. For below the silence of the water, in a hidden chamber not yet lit, the next part of Hephaestus' story was already waiting. Beneath the surface of the sea, where the light grew pale and the noise of the upper world faded away, Hephaestus was carried into shelter, not into splendor, not into the wide courts of Olympus, but into a hidden dwelling of stone and water, a place far removed from judgment and far gentler than the heights he had left behind. The old stories say that Thetis and Eurynome received him there. Thetis, the silver-footed one of the sea, ancient, graceful, and quiet in her care. And Eurynome, daughter of Oceanus, whose presence belongs to older waters, to calm currents, and to the secret life of the deep. Together they gathered the fallen child and brought him to a cave beneath the waves, where he could remain unseen and where time itself seemed to move more softly. It was not a place of bright fire, at least not at first. It was a place of dim reflections, of cool stone, of water shifting in the distance, of silence broken only by the sea's long breathing. The cave opened inward, its walls smoothed by ages of hidden motion, its chambers touched by the faintest glimmer as sunlight filtered down through layers of blue, arriving at last as something quiet and wavering, something more felt than seen. There were ledges of dark rock, shallow pools that caught what little light remained, and gentle ribbons of current passing through narrow openings, so that the whole cavern seemed alive, not restless, but wakeful in its own underwater way. Here, far from ridicule, far from command, far from the gleaming order of Olympus, Hephaestus began another life. Not yet as master of the great forge beneath volcanoes, not yet as architect of divine halls, not yet as the maker of impossible things, but simply as one who had survived descent, and now rested, hidden in the deep. Perhaps at first, there was only stillness, days passing in cool blue shadow, the sea above in constant motion, the cave below remaining calm, as though it had been set aside from the harsher movements of the world. And slowly, within that refuge, something began to gather. Not anger, not ambition, not even a wish to be seen, but attention, the sort of attention that lingers over small things, the curve of a shell, the glint along a wet stone, the way light trembles on the cave wall, the faint color hidden inside mineral veins, the subtle beauty of what most would overlook. And from that attention, craft began. Perhaps first in simple forms, a shaped ornament, a clasp, a delicate chain, a piece of metal worked not for conquest, but for grace. For Thetis and Eurynome, he made beautiful things, bright adornments, carefully fashioned pieces, objects touched by skill before they were touched by glory. The old stories remember this, that even in concealment, even before he was welcomed among the Olympians, his hands already knew how to make wonder. And what a strange and lovely beginning that is. Not a god claiming his place through force, not a hero proving himself in battle, but a maker in a sea cave, learning the language of form, bringing beauty into being, far from praise, far from spectacle, far from the eyes of those who had cast him away. It may be that this is where Hephaestus becomes most himself, not in the thunder of recognition, but in private work, in the patient turning of material beneath the hand, in the slow understanding of heat, weight, shape, balance, in discovering that what is bent can still be useful, that what is rough can still be refined, that what has fallen can still become necessary. And so, within that underwater chamber, water and fire met in a new way, not as enemies, not as opposites, but as neighboring presences. Outside, the sea moved in cool silence. Inside, the first small flames may have begun to glow, carefully tended, protected from draft and damp, nursed into steadiness. A modest beginning, but a true one. A furnace not yet grand, an anvil perhaps still simple, tools still few, and yet enough. Enough for metal to warm, enough for effort to find rhythm, enough for a hidden life to become a shaping life. Imagine it now. The cave still washed in dim blue light from the world above, but deeper in, a second color gathering, amber, red, a pulse of warmth against the stone, not overwhelming the quiet, only changing it. Where once there had been only coolness, there was now a center, a place to return to, a place where thought became action and action became form. The sounds too would have changed, not loudly, just enough. The low crackle of flame, the soft breath of air feeding it, the small clear ring of metal touched with intention, each sound brief, measured, and absorbed into the surrounding hush. In such a place, one could forget Olympus entirely, or rather, one could let it become distant, less important than the glowing edge of a worked piece, less immediate than the next careful strike, less real than the warmth gathered in the palm of the hand. For the cave did not ask Hephaestus to explain himself. It did not compare him to brighter gods. It did not ask him to be beautiful in their way. It did not require ease or symmetry or grace of movement. It simply gave him space. And in that space, he began to create. This is one of the quiet truths within his myth, that exile became workshop, that shelter became school, that hiddenness became mastery. And perhaps many things begin like that, not in triumph, but in seclusion, not under full light, but in a half-lit chamber where one is finally left alone long enough to learn what one's hands were made to do. Over time, the cave must have filled with signs of his becoming, tools laid in order, new pieces cooling beside the fire, ornaments catching small flickers of orange light, surfaces polished by repeated use, traces of soot darkening the stone. the air carrying both salt and metal, both sea breath and ember. And Thetis and Eurynome, moving through that place, would have seen what Olympus had not yet understood, that the one who had been cast down was not diminished. He was becoming remarkable, not in spite of the fall alone, but through what he made after it. And so the cave beneath the sea, hidden from the sky, became the cradle of a different kind of power. Not the power to command, but the power to shape. Not the power to dazzle, but the power to endure. Not the power of sudden victory, but of lasting workmanship. And from there, from those chambers of water-dark stone, from that first glow carefully held against the deep, the future work of Hephaestus began to gather in silence. The shields, the halls, the moving tripods, the crafted wonders that would one day astonish gods and mortals alike. All of them, in some quiet way, began here, in a sea cave, in refuge, in patience, in the first true warmth of a forge made far from home. So rest here a little longer, in the coolness beyond the fire, in the red hush near the coals, in the place where the sea keeps its distance, and the work has only just begun. For in that hidden chamber beneath the water, while the world above remained unaware, Hephaestus was learning to turn solitude into art. And soon, deep within his careful hands, the next part of the story would begin to take shape. And in that hidden chamber beneath the sea, where flame had begun to live beside water, and where silence no longer felt empty, but purposeful, Hephaestus continued his work, not quickly, not to prove anything, not to call the attention of Olympus back toward him, but simply because his hands had found their nature. And once they had found it, they could not help but follow it. Day after day, or whatever could be called a day, in a place where sunlight arrived only faintly, and time was measured less by the sky than by warmth, cooling, and the rhythm of repeated effort, he learned the slow conversation between hand and material, how metal resists, then yields, how heat must be watched, not forced, how each substance has its own temper, its own moment, its own quiet boundary beyond which it will not be hurried. This was not the knowledge of thunder, which acts all at once, nor the knowledge of waves which move in endless motion. It was another kind of understanding, closer to listening than commanding, closer to patience than power. Hephaestus did not seize form from metal. He waited for form to reveal itself. He studied weight, edge, balance, curvature, the hidden line that runs through a thing before it is fully made. And then, with steady care, he brought that line into the world. Perhaps that is why his craft feels so different from the force of other gods. For some powers arrive in brilliance and are gone. Some dazzle, some overwhelm, some strike fear, some demand surrender. But the work of Hephaestus gathers quietly. It asks for nearness. It asks for time. It asks the eye to linger, the mind to soften, the heart to recognize beauty not in sudden perfection, but in what has been patiently shaped. And so, in that first forge, the god who had fallen from the heights began to discover a deeper strength, not the strength to dominate, but the strength to remain, to continue, to refine, to return again and again to the same fire, the same tools, the same glowing piece, until roughness gave way to grace. This too is a sacred kind of power, to stay with a thing long enough to understand it, to keep working even when no one is watching, to create not for applause, but because creation itself has become a form of breathing. And in the old myths, Hephaestus is often remembered as different from the others, his body marked, his movement uneven, his beauty not of the effortless kind that poets gave to Apollo or Aphrodite or the bright and radiant gods of the upper air. But here, in the hush of the cave, that difference did not diminish him. It became part of his wisdom. For one who does not move through the world with ease may come to understand texture more deeply, weight more carefully, resistance more intimately. What others pass by, he might notice. What others dismiss, he might transform. And so there is a tenderness in the figure of Hephaestus, not weakness, but tenderness, because his greatness does not rise from untouchable perfection. It rises from endurance, from exactness, from devotion to the work itself. You may imagine him now, bent slightly over the forge light, the glow touching his arms, the shadows shifting across the stone behind him, his tools arranged with quiet familiarity nearby. A pair of tongs, a hammer worn smooth at the grip, metal pieces laid out in different stages of becoming, some still dark and unformed, some warming to orange, some newly shaped and left to rest. Nothing hurried, nothing careless, each motion placed within the next, as though the whole craft were a long and unbroken sentence, spoken without words. There is comfort in such rhythm. The repeated lift of the hand, the measured strike, the turn of the piece, the return to the flame, the brief pause before beginning again. Not noise, but pattern. Not labor as strain, but labor as order. And perhaps the cave itself began to change around him, the walls holding more warmth than before, the floor marked by regular use, the dark corners reflecting occasional glints of polished metal, the air growing richer, carrying the scent of heated ore, salt from the sea, and the faint sweetness of ash. What had once been merely a refuge became a workshop, and what had once been only shelter became identity. For this is the phase in which Hephaestus is no longer simply hidden. He is becoming, not all at once, and not in ways the outer world could yet recognize, but inwardly, decisively. He is becoming the maker, the one to whom impossible tasks will one day be given, the one whose skill even the Olympians will need, the one who can fashion not only ornaments, but mechanisms, palaces, weapons, chains, wonders. Yet all of that belongs to a later brightness. For now, what matters is simpler. A god at work, a flame carefully tended, a mind growing more precise with every quiet attempt. And there is something deeply restful in this part of his story, because nothing here demands urgency. Nothing must be won. Nothing must be chased. There is only process, only the old truth that beautiful things are rarely made in haste. They emerge slowly, through heat, through correction, through returning to the same place with gentler hands and clearer sight. And perhaps that is why Hephaestus remains so beloved among makers, among smiths, builders, craftsmen, potters, inventors, all those who know that true making asks something rare: attention without impatience, care without vanity, persistence without spectacle. In him, the myths honor that quiet devotion. They honor the hand that keeps shaping, even after rejection, the eye that keeps seeing possibility even in what is cast aside, the spirit that does not harden into bitterness, but turns instead toward mastery. So let this part of the story rest gently around you now. The warmth of the forge, the dim chamber beneath the sea, the low gleam along the anvil's edge, the soft ring of each deliberate strike, the stillness between motions, the growing sense that something beautiful is being formed, even if it is not yet complete. And as Hephaestus works, without haste, without witness, without need for praise, the shape of his future draws nearer. For soon, the hidden craft of the sea cave will begin to lead him back toward the wider world. And what was made in silence will one day be seen. But not yet. For now, there is only the red glow, the patient hand, and the sacred calm of a maker learning fully who he is. And after long hidden seasons beneath the sea, after the first forge had glowed in silence, after patient hands had learned what fire could reveal, the work of Hephaestus began, at last, to reach beyond the cave, not through proclamation, not through demand, but through something made. The old stories say that Hera, who had once cast him away, received from him a marvelous gift, a throne of gold, not merely beautiful, but crafted with such rare intelligence, such flawless care, that no eye could look upon it without wonder. It shone with the calm brightness of finished work, with balanced lines, with ornaments so delicately formed that they seemed almost grown rather than forged, as though metal itself had consented to become elegant beneath his touch. It was not a crude object, not something made in anger, not a thing of noise or visible threat. It was refined, quietly astonishing, a work so complete that it concealed its deeper purpose within its beauty. And when Hera sat upon it, the throne held her there, not violently, not with any harsh display, but with hidden bonds, subtle and unbreakable, woven into the craft itself, a snare of workmanship so skillfully made that no force on Olympus could easily undo it. And so the bright halls of the gods, so often filled with certainty, with rank, with effortless radiance, were suddenly touched by another kind of power. Not the power of thunder, not the power of war, not the charm of desire, but the power of design. The power that can wait in silence, that can conceal itself in symmetry, that can do through making what shouting cannot do at all. And perhaps there was confusion among the Olympians then, perhaps surprise, perhaps the dawning realization that the one once forgotten, the one cast down and sent away, had become someone none of them could ignore. For it is one thing to dismiss a wounded child, and another thing entirely to discover that same being has become the master of forms, the shaper of impossible devices, the keeper of a knowledge no other god possesses. But tonight, we need not linger on embarrassment, or vengeance, or any sharp feeling that might disturb the quiet of the tale. Instead, we may let this moment unfold more gently, as the turning of a hidden pattern, as the slow return of one long absent, as the first sign that what was made in obscurity had now reached even the heights of Olympus. The gods wished Hera freed, yet no one among them could undo the throne, and so their thoughts turned, inevitably, to Hephaestus, the maker of the gift, the only one who knew its secret design, the only one who could loosen what craft had bound. And now the story changes once more. For until this moment, Hephaestus had lived below, sheltered by the sea, shaped by solitude, known perhaps by a few, but not yet restored to the company of the gods. Now the path back began to open, not because he begged for entry, not because he forced the gates, but because Olympus itself had come to need him. There is something deeply quiet in that, to be called back not through pleading, but through necessity, to return not as ornament, but as one whose skill has become indispensable. Some stories say that Dionysus came for him, gentle in his own strange way, god of wine, loosening, festivity, and softened boundaries, not as a conqueror, but as a companion, not to drag him upward in struggle, but to lead him in calmer fashion, to ease the distance between exile and return. Sometimes he is imagined guiding Hephaestus upon a mule through winding paths, upward from the lower world toward the shining home he had once lost. And there is a curious peace in that image, not a warrior's homecoming, not a triumphal march, but a quiet procession, a road taken slowly, with no need for grandeur, a craftsman returning, after long absence, to the place that once had no room for him. Perhaps the sky looked different then, not as it had during the fall, when all things opened downward into uncertainty, but as something approached carefully once again, the upper air brightening, the sea left farther behind, the hidden cave becoming memory, the forge still warm in recollection, the tools at rest until he would one day use them again. And Hephaestus, moving toward Olympus, would not have been the same as the one who left it. The one who fell had been unformed in the eyes of others. The one who returned had become fully himself, not flawless, not transformed into some other kind of god, but established, measured, possessing within him the steady authority of a maker who knows his art. And perhaps that is why this phase of the myth carries such quiet meaning, because it is not only a return to place, it is a return with substance, a return after becoming, a return in which the old rejection no longer defines the one who was sent away. For Hephaestus does not come back as a wounded plea. He comes back as the hand behind wonders, the mind behind hidden mechanisms, the fire beneath finished beauty. And when at last he reached Olympus, the bright dwellings of the immortals must have seemed altered. Or perhaps it was he who had altered, for places once filled with distance can look different when one no longer enters them seeking approval. The halls were still gleaming, the gods still adorned in their familiar powers, the air still clear with the strange stillness of divine height. And yet now, there was another presence among them, slower than some, quieter than most, but carrying something none could imitate: the knowledge of how to make, the wisdom of resistance and yielding, of structure and balance, of hidden strength within graceful form. And so Hera was released, not with noise, not with cruelty, but with the hand of the one who had fashioned the trap, and who alone understood how to end it. The bonds loosened. The throne became once more only a throne, and the order of Olympus settled into a new arrangement, for Hephaestus was no longer outside it. He had taken his place among the immortals, not as the brightest, nor the loudest, nor the most adored, but as something rarer, the necessary maker. And after that, the high halls of the gods would shine more brightly because of him. Their palaces, their ornaments, their impossible devices, their armor, their crafted marvels, all these would bear the mark of the one who had known both exile and return, both hidden labor and open recognition. And perhaps that is the quiet wisdom of this part of the story, that true place is not always given at first. Sometimes it is reached only after distance, after making, after long unseen devotion, until what one carries within can no longer be denied. So rest here now, in the stillness after return. The road behind him, the heights before him, the golden throne emptied of its secret bonds, the halls of Olympus waiting, changed forever by the presence of the god who had come back. And soon, among those radiant dwellings, with skill now fully acknowledged, Hephaestus would begin the greater works for which the world would remember him. And once Hephaestus had returned to Olympus, once his place among the immortals had been restored, his work did not become lighter, it became greater. For now, his skill was no longer hidden in a sea cave, or known only to those who had sheltered him beneath the waves. Now it moved through the high and radiant order of the gods, through their dwellings, their adornments, their instruments of power, their shining and impossible designs. And yet, for all the brightness of Olympus, the deepest part of his art still belonged elsewhere. Not in the open sky, not in the banquet halls, not among the easy splendors of the divine court, but below, far below, where mountain and fire meet. The old imagination placed his greatest forge beneath volcanoes, and most of all, beneath Etna, that vast and ancient mountain rising dark against the sky, its slopes quiet for long stretches of time, and then suddenly alive with smoke, with embers, with the deep breathing of the earth itself. To many, a volcano seemed like a wound in the world, but in the language of myth, it could also be something else. A workshop, a hidden chamber of making, a place where pressure, heat, and buried force were not merely signs of destruction, but the conditions from which form might emerge. So let the story descend once more, not into exile now, but into mastery, through the roots of the mountain, through chambers of black stone, through long corridors lit by a reddish gleam, until at last, the forge itself begins to open around you. It is vast, far larger than the first workshop beneath the sea, and older in feeling. The ceilings arch high above, lost in dim shadow, while along the walls, veins of mineral brightness catch and return the furnace light. Great anvils stand upon the rock like altars of iron. Bellows breathe in measured pulses. Channels of molten metal move slowly through carved beds in the floor, casting a warm glow that flickers against pillars of stone. Nothing here is wild. Nothing is chaotic. Even the fire, for all its power, is held within order, guided, contained, answered by skill. And nearby, the The Cyclopes labor beside him, ancient smiths of tremendous strength, one-eyed and unwavering, not monstrous in this telling, but solemn, enduring, and wholly at home in the deep places of the earth. Together they move within the rhythm of the forge, one tending the bellows, one turning a heated piece with long black tongs, one lifting a hammer and bringing it down with perfect timing, so that each sound joins the next, not as clamor, but as cadence, a sequence, a pattern, a measured and continuous music of labor. You might hear it now, the long breath of air feeding the flame, the low rush of heat awakening metal, the clear ringing strike upon the anvil, then a pause, then another, and another, each one spaced with care, never hurried, never wasted, so that the whole mountain seems to listen and answer in faint returning echoes. This is not the noise of battle. It is the sound of making. And there is a deep calm in that distinction, for battle consumes, but craft arranges. Battle scatters, but craft gathers. Battle leaves ruin behind it, while craft asks what can be built, what can be repaired, what can be shaped into lasting form. And Hephaestus, standing in the firelit chamber, belongs entirely to that second order of power. Imagine him there now, the glow of the furnace upon his face, the strength of his arms made visible in the lift and turning of his work, the practiced certainty of one who no longer doubts his place at the anvil. Near him lie hammers of different weights, chisels, molds, tools so finely balanced that they seem almost alive in the hand. Beyond them rest completed pieces, cooling slowly on broad stone tables, their surfaces darkening from orange to red, from red to bronze, from bronze to the quiet sheen of finished metal. Everything in the forge is arranged for purpose, nothing ornamental without reason, nothing powerful without restraint. And because this is the house of Hephaestus, even power itself becomes precise. Flame does not simply burn, it tempers. Metal does not merely harden, it receives shape. Weight does not overwhelm, it is distributed, balanced, understood. Perhaps that is why his domain feels so different from the realms of other gods. Poseidon stirs the sea. Ares enters the cry of battle. Zeus commands the sky by force and decree. But Hephaestus works through alignment, through pressure properly held, through heat rightly timed, through the exact meeting of effort and form. His genius is not excess, it is proportion. And in such a place, time begins to loosen. One could remain beside the forge for hours, or days, or longer still, watching a piece move through its stages, dark and unyielding at first, then warming, then softening at the edges, then taking curve or edge or pattern beneath the patient hand, then cooling again into firmness, changed forever. There is something deeply restful in this old sequence, to know that transformation need not be sudden, that even metal changes slowly, that strength and softness may belong to the same process at different moments, under different kinds of care. Perhaps the mountain above would sometimes tremble, just slightly, and on the outer slopes, mortals might see smoke rising into the air, or hear a distant rumble beneath their feet, and say to one another that the forge of Hephaestus was active again, that somewhere below, beyond the reach of ordinary sight, the god of craft was at his labor, fashioning some new wonder, some armor, some chain, some radiant device, some object whose purpose had not yet entered the world. And perhaps they were right, for in myth, volcanic fire is never only eruption. It is also hidden work, the sign that creation continues beneath appearances, that something is being formed far below what the eye can follow. So let yourself rest in that thought now. The mountain standing in darkness beneath the stars, its summit breathing a little smoke, its roots lit from within, and deep inside, the great forge alive with steady fire, the cyclopes moving with solemn ease, the anvils waiting, the furnaces glowing, the tools laid out in perfect order, and Hephaestus among them, calm, absorbed, utterly at home in the labor that is also his gift. Here, there is no exile, no uncertainty, no need to be seen in order to be real. There is only mastery, earned slowly, held quietly, expressed not in words, but in the long, exact language of the hand. And from this forge beneath Etna, from this chamber of heat and order, the wonders of gods and heroes alike would continue to emerge, one by one, touched by flame, measured by skill, and given their enduring form. And as the bellows breathe again, and another piece is lifted toward the light, the story of Hephaestus moves onward, deeper into the marvels only such a maker could bring into being. And from the great forge beneath Etna, from the chambers of heat and measured sound, from the patient labor of Hephaestus and those who worked beside him, there began to emerge the wonders for which his name would be remembered. Not only tools, not only ornaments, not only the hidden structures that held the dwellings of the gods together, but marvels, things so finely made, so exact in their balance, so strange in their beauty, that they seemed to belong halfway between craft and enchantment. For Hephaestus did not merely shape metal. He understood how to give it character, how to bring into bronze or gold not just form, but presence. And so the works that left his forge were never empty objects. They carried within them the quiet intelligence of their maker, the calm precision of his thought, the stillness of his hand before each motion began. Some of these creations adorned Olympus itself, the halls of the gods, bright with crafted detail, their thresholds smooth and gleaming, their chambers supported by structures no mortal hand could have devised. There were shining seats, ornamented tables, fittings and fixtures so refined that even the effortless beauty of the Olympians seemed fuller in their presence. What the gods possessed by nature, Hephaestus strengthened by making. What they wore with ease, he shaped through labor. What they took for granted, he had first imagined, measured, and brought into being. And yet his most remarkable works were often those that seemed almost alive. The old stories speak of golden attendants, maidens fashioned from precious metal, who moved on their own, who could support their master, who carried within them something like understanding. Not flesh, not breath, not mortal life, and yet not lifeless either. They belong to that mysterious edge in myth where craftsmanship approaches animation, where intelligence enters form, where a created thing seems to cross a threshold and become more than matter alone. Imagine them now, their surfaces warm in the forge light, their movement graceful, their steps quiet upon the polished floor, their presence neither uncanny nor harsh, but serene. They were not made for spectacle. They were made with care. And in them, perhaps more than anywhere else, Hephaestus revealed the full depth of his gift. For he could do what very few gods even attempted. He could create assistance, companionship, motion born from design. And there were the self-moving tripods, wondrous vessels and stands, crafted with such subtle ingenuity that they could roll of their own accord into the gatherings of the gods and return again when their part was done. What a gentle image that is. Not a machine in the cold sense, not a device stripped of beauty, but an object at once elegant and purposeful, answering its place in the world with quiet readiness. Everything Hephaestus made seems to carry that union, usefulness and grace, strength and refinement, order and astonishment. Some of his works guarded rather than served, and among these, one of the most memorable was Talos, the great bronze being who watched over Crete, circling the island's edge like a living boundary, vast, resolute, and fashioned for protection. In another telling, such a figure might be described with noise and threat. But tonight, we need only notice the scale of imagination required to conceive such a guardian, a presence cast in bronze, given movement, given purpose, placed between what is sheltered and what would approach it from the sea. It is yet another sign of the mind of Hephaestus, that he could think not only in ornaments or in weapons, but in systems, in thresholds, in guardianship, in the architecture of safety itself. And then, perhaps most beautiful of all, there was the shield of Achilles, a work so intricate that it became more than armor. Upon its surface, Hephaestus set images of the world, cities, fields, dances, harvests, rivers, stars, whole patterns of mortal life held within a circle of metal. It was not simply made to defend a warrior, it was made to contain a vision, as though the smith god wished to show that even in an age of conflict, what truly endures is not only battle, but the wider world around it, the life of men and women, the turning of seasons, the labor of fields, the music of festivals, the order of the heavens above. What kind of maker places a universe upon a shield? One who sees beyond function alone, one who knows that the greatest works are not merely strong, but meaningful. One who understands that metal can bear memory, that form can carry story, that a crafted object can become a mirror of the world itself. And there were chains as well, subtle bonds, unbreakable links, works of restraint so perfect that even gods could not easily escape them. There were doors that opened of their own accord, devices that answered the will of their place, fittings so exact they seemed almost inevitable, as though they had not been invented, but discovered. And in all of this, one truth returns again and again. Hephaestus does not create carelessly. Nothing leaves his forge unfinished in thought, whether small or grand. Each thing is made in relation to its purpose, its weight, its balance, its hidden strain, its proper motion, its lasting form. And perhaps this is why his marvels feel restful to dwell among. because they are not random wonders. They belong. They answer a need. They are shaped with enough patience that they seem at peace with themselves. There is no excess in them for its own sake, no chaos masquerading as brilliance, only the deep satisfaction of something rightly made, something complete, something that could not have been hurried. So let these wonders drift before you now. The shining halls of Olympus, their beauty strengthened by crafted detail. The golden attendants moving with quiet grace through firelit chambers. The tripods rolling gently to their places among the gods. The bronze guardian keeping his silent watch beside the sea. The great shield, its wide curved face holding stars and rivers and cities and dancing human lives. And behind them all, the forge itself, where such things began not as miracles, but as intention, as sketches and thought, as heated metal slowly persuaded into lasting form. And as the marvels of Hephaestus passed one by one through the mind, they do not need to be remembered, only felt, as signs of a god whose genius was not loud, but exact, not restless, but enduring, not dazzling for a moment only, but capable of giving shape to things that outlast the moment entirely. For now the story has moved far from exile, far from the long descent through sky, far from the hidden cave where the first small flames were tended. Now we see the fullness of what that quiet beginning became. A maker of wonders, a shaper of moving gold and guarding bronze, a god whose craft could hold not only strength, but order, beauty, and even a small reflection of the world itself. And when at last the forge grows quieter, and the last finished piece is laid to rest upon the stone, another thought begins to rise, not about what Hephaestus made, but about what he means. And after the wonders have been made, after the shield, the golden attendants, the halls of the gods, the hidden mechanisms, the crafted forms that seemed almost to think and move on their own, after all of this, something gentler remains. For the story of Hephaestus is not only the story of what he forged, it is also the story of what was transformed within the making. He began as one cast down, a god sent away from brightness, a child removed from the high and radiant world, a figure the myths remembered as marked, uneven, unlike the easy perfection of others. And yet nothing in his story stays fixed in that first condition. Not the fall, not the exile, not the hidden years, not even the wound. Everything passes through another process, another chamber, another fire, until what once seemed like loss takes on a different shape. This is the quiet wisdom held inside his myth, that not all power arrives in splendor, not all beauty is effortless, not all sacred things descend from the sky already complete. Some must be formed slowly. Some must live for a while in obscurity. Some must dwell below the surface, in silence, in labor, in patience, before their nature can be fully known. And perhaps that is why Hephaestus feels so close to human life, closer in some ways than many of the other gods. For thunder is magnificent, but distant. Perfect beauty can be admired, but may remain untouched. Victory shines brightly, yet often vanishes as soon as it has arrived. But craft, endurance, the making of something useful and beautiful through repeated care, these belong to ordinary life as much as to myth. They belong to the hand at work, the mind returning to a task, the heart that does not give up because the first welcome was withheld. Hephaestus is the god of that quieter dignity, the dignity of the maker, the one who does not always stand at the center of the room, and yet shapes what the room itself depends upon, the one whose work may be overlooked at first, until suddenly everyone realizes they are already living among its results, the one who turns material into shelter, structure, adornment, protection, meaning. And so his fire is not only the fire of furnaces, it is also the inward fire that keeps a person working, learning, adjusting, trying again. The fire that does not flare up in spectacle, but holds steady through the long hours. The fire that warms rather than blinds. The fire that changes what it touches without needing to announce itself. There is something deeply restful in that thought, that the most enduring transformations are often the least dramatic. Ore becomes metal. Metal becomes form. Form becomes beauty. Beauty becomes use, and use becomes something loved, something remembered, something that quietly enters the fabric of the world. So too with the life of Hephaestus. His story does not rush toward glory. It settles into significance. You may imagine now the forge grown quieter, the great labor completed for a time, the anvil still, the tools laid back in their places, the molten channels dimming to a softer red, the mountain above silent beneath the night, and Hephaestus himself no longer striking the metal, no longer lifting the hammer, but resting in the warmth that remains after work is done. Not alone exactly, but self-contained, at peace within the order he has shaped around him. And around him, the traces of his life seem to gather into one whole. The long descent from heaven, the sheltering cave beneath the sea, the first small ornaments made in hidden chambers, the careful learning of heat and weight, the return to Olympus not through pleading, but through necessity, the vast forge beneath Etna, the wonders that carried his thought into the world. All of it joining now, not as separate episodes, but as one continuous movement, a movement from rejection toward mastery, from concealment toward recognition, from rawness toward form. And perhaps, without needing to hold the details, you can feel what the myth has been saying all along, that what is cast aside is not always lost, that what seems broken may still become skillful, that what falls may yet find its proper place, that useful beauty patiently made has a holiness of its own. This is why the figure of Hephaestus glows so softly at the end of the story. Not because he conquered more fiercely than others, not because he shone more brightly, but because he remained, because he kept shaping, because he answered pain not only with sorrow, but with creation, because he made things that held, and in a restless world, there is great comfort in what holds. So let the image simplify now. No need for halls or shields or divine thrones, only the deep mountain, the low red light, the warmth inside stone, and somewhere within it, a quiet God, keeper of craft, guardian of the useful flame, resting beside the fire that never fully goes out. The air is still. The embers breathe gently. The dark around them is wide and calm. And all the old sharpness of exile, of distance, of not yet belonging, has softened into something else, into understanding, into form, into peace. And as the forge dims, it does not disappear. It only settles, like a final glow beneath ash, like a thought growing quiet before sleep, like the hidden work of the earth, continuing even when no one is awake to see it. And so the story of Hephaestus comes to rest, not ending in noise, not ending in triumph, but in warmth, in stillness, in the sacred calm of something fully made. And if you wish, you may leave him there now, beneath the mountain, beside the ember light, in the hush that follows creation, while you drift farther and farther into rest. And now, there is nothing more to follow, nothing more to hold, only warmth, darkness, and quiet. The mountain is still, the forge is dim, and the last red glow fades softly into the deep. You can rest now.